back to Guru Talk, and today's topic is going to be abdominal distension. And I have a really distinguished panel here of experts, and we're going to talk about what causes the distended abdomen and what can be done to correct it. Obviously, Phil Heath losing the Mr. Olympia competition, a lot of people attributing that loss to a distended stomach, not being able to control that abdomen. It's been getting progressively worse over the years. So I have with us on the panel today, all the way from China, Milos Sarcev, our good friend. Welcome, Milos.
Hey, Dave. Good to see you again.
Yeah.
Hi, George.
And then, of course, we have Dr. George Touliatos from Greece. So we're worldwide. We're international today for sure here. How's it going, George?
I'm fine. It's 7 in the afternoon here, and I guess Milos is about 10 p.m. in China.
No, it's after midnight.
It's late there.
It's after midnight, yes, and I'm a little jet-lagged and everything, but when Dave calls you and say, okay, are you available, I have to be available.
That's right.
So okay.
Milos has like a little like satellite dish set up on top of his hotel, so he can do Skype with us from China, because they're very restricted there. Now, guys, Milos, you were
let me tell you, there is no Instagram, there is no Google, there is no YouTube here. So I heard there is no Skype. Like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? But somehow this has worked. I hope it's going to work.
Now, Milos, you're there working with one of the top Chinese bodybuilders there. You're going to be there till December. Is that right?
Yes, I'm here for like a couple of months because his name is Lu Chen Hui. It's really phenomenal bodybuilder. It's like 6'1". He's like 280 pounds. Incredible structure. I'll send you the pictures, right? And
yeah.
I've never seen him before. He's competing in this different federation, but now he's very serious to try and make it to the IBB Pro League. So I think the first contest he's going to do is a Hida show in Japan.
Oh, cool.
I hope he's going to win that and qualify. Yeah, he's an incredible guy. I'm here for like 6 days. And of course, as you know, I am killing him with my training, and he's responding unbelievably. So I'm really looking forward to see what happens in next 2 months.
You doing the giant sets with him? Uh-oh. I think China shut Milos down. Milos, did we lose you? Yeah, I think we lost Milos. Milos they stormed in his room and they closed down the they're probably listening to us right now, so they closed him down. We'll have to get him back. George, you're still there though, right?
Yeah.
Okay. George, let's talk about the Mr. Olympia competition. Milos was out there. We'll get him back hopefully. But in the meantime, you obviously saw the pictures. We talked about this last year. Phil Heath progressively has been having bigger and bigger abdominal distension problems. Some people call it the bubble gut phenomenon. But obviously, his upper body has gotten bigger. His legs seem to be really good. His conditioning is great, but he's having a lot of trouble controlling the midsection. First of all, from a doctor's perspective, what's going on in that midsection? Is it organ growth? Is it fat under the skin? Visceral fat? Is it something that can be corrected? Give us the medical, I guess you could say, evaluation of it.
Yes, Dave, thank you for one more time for the invitation. Now, as we talked on the first podcast on last June, we estimated that this bubble gut phenomenon is multifactorial.
Yeah, go ahead.
This means that it's a different variety of factors that contribute to this. So it's, as you well mentioned, it's the organomegaly, meaning all the viscera, the enlargement, the internal organs. And this is the result of GH chronic use, and all the organs have IGF-1 receptors, so they grow as organs. Then we also have, as you said, the omental or splanchnic fat, which is the fat that accumulates within viscera, the greater and the lesser omentum.
George, explain what the greater and lesser omentum is for our viewers. A lot of them don't understand that it's actually like a sheath of a blanket that covers the organs.
It's a sheath that covers all the internal organs, mainly apart from pancreas and kidneys. So it's stomach, it's duodenum, it's small intestine, it's large intestine. So they're covered both layers in a sheath that within vessels and nerves and lymphatic vessels also provide all the nutrients. Now this enlarges in the presence of insulin, okay? So as with ordinary people, they get fat because of insulin abuse. I mean, when they eat and they produce calories and carbs and whatsoever, then they got the belly. So this is enhanced, of course, if you use exogenous insulin. So it's different with the subcutaneous fat, which is located under the skin, under the epidermis.
Right. Let me stop you for a second, just because I like to get our audience up to speed. So what you're basically saying is that this blanket, think of our viewers, think of it as a blanket that covers the organs that's under the abdominal musculature, and yes. It nourishes the abdominal musculature. It protects it. Now, when you eat excessive amounts of sugary foods, you don't take care of yourself, that expands. It gets fattier. And that's what
even in ordinary people, not just
right. When you see, like, when I used to see my dad had this big stomach, but he had no fat anyplace else, and that's because that omental fat has gotten bigger. Now, what you're saying is you could simulate that same growth of that omental fat by actually physically taking a lot of insulin. So while you might be helping to build muscle and drive nutrients into the muscle cells, you're also accumulating fat there, is what you're saying. And this is not the fat that you see under the skin. This is deep, what we call, they call it visceral fat, but it's really this omental fat, right?
And the omental fat is related with insulin resistance, interleukin-6, tumor necrosis factor, and metabolic issues.
No, but why is taking insulin cause that? Because you would think if you actually needed the insulin and it was actually doing something good, that it wouldn't necessarily cause fat deposition there, especially if you have no fat anyplace else in your body.
Well, we know from insulin metabolism that it induces lipogenesis and fat storage, isn't it?
True, but I mean, I thought it only did that like when you had an excessive overload of carbohydrates present, and you would think it would put it under the skin first, right?
Yes, but it also the funny part is that it also grows inside the abdominal cavity, right? And it's also calorie related, not just carbs.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So keep going.
So yes, it's the combination of insulin, IGF-1, or growth hormone in chronic use that releases IGF-1. Now, another aspect is the 17-alkylated oral pills, the hepatotoxic ones. They disrupt the intestinal flora. Now, all the good bacteria that also they are broken down when we use antibiotics, and we have diarrhea and we have gut bloating. Yeah. So you got to replace this, and you got to use probiotics and also Lactobacillus acidophilus. And Samir Benoit had told me 10 years ago on the phone that he uses also Candida albicans, the fungus, as a supplementary source.
Really?
So this provide a relief in the gas and in the distension. And as a matter of fact, I had realized that 20 years ago when I was a fitness competitor, I was just 180 pounds. I was using a lot of pills before the show, but zero insulin and zero growth hormone. Right. So I was, as I was posing 2 weeks before the show, I noticed a distension. I said, what the heck? I'm not using any growth factors. Why I'm like this? And I believe it was related with all the halotestin, the Winston, the Anavar, and these liver toxic pills, that we used before the show.
And you think what they're doing is killing off the good bacteria in the colon?
Yes, it's like taking antibiotics. It kills the bad and the good bacteria. So we don't have this kind of digestion process. So we can use also digestive enzymes that they can enhance the digestion of food after you eat. Right. And several bodybuilders use them. And also some other thing is the consumption of fiber along with protein, because when animal protein is not accompanied with fiber, it produces nitrogen and gas within the colon. Right. So fiber provides a better digestion and slows down all this process. Right.
Plus fiber actually feeds the good bacteria in there. Soluble fiber is a food source, for the bacteria in there. I'm a big believer, George, of eliminating orals. I'm not a big oral guy, Anyway, I think they're just not good for the body. The injectables kind of do everything that the orals do anyway.
Well, the point is that some people assume that the injectable, even the ones that they do not aromatize, they hold a little bit of electrolytes and water retention, just the last week at least. Yeah. But some orals, they are very androgenic, like halotestin, that provides hardening, fat burning, and strength. So we don't have this in injectable form,
Right.
Also, Anavar is not provided in injectable.
I think that you can do everything with the injectables that you can do with the orals, and I think that
what about Halo? Halo is a necessary drug before the show.
Or don't use orals at all, and just maybe use it the last couple of weeks, just so that you don't get that destruction of the internal flora as you're suggesting. Now, you know what, George? I want to take
you're aware of the Mike Menzer's therapy that he used too many orals, huh? Right?
No, what was his? What did Mike Menzer do?
About 80 Zambon or 30 Halotes. You know, he was a big abuser of that.
I didn't know.
I was so hard as a rock.
I didn't know that, yeah. Well, maybe he just didn't genetically have an issue with his intestinal tract. Milos, let's go to you now. Talk to me a little bit about, what your theory is on why these guys are getting the distended abdomens, and what do you think can be done to control that?
Well, Dr. George said perfectly. I mean, he fragmented and listed one after another. So this is really, I agree with him. However, we know about gut being adaptive. I mean, really, when they say intestines can shrink according to starvation, they can expand according to overeating.
Right.
Beside the greater mental and visceral fat, the mental fat. Yes, insulin, you see, as you know, I'm an insulin guy, so of course I'm not just, trying to be different and tell you guys, no, if you know what you're doing. Dr. George says correctly, if you have a hypercaloric, you have more calories that you need, then potentially it can be stored as a mental fat. You also pointed out why not in subcutaneous fat, right? Because again, if it's overloaded with insulin, insulin is not selective. You have carbohydrates, you have amino acids, you have triglycerides. It's not selective. It's going to store it. But if you really time it, this is why, if you remember when we had that insulin debate, I was against long-acting insulin because it's 24 hours in your system, and it's much better to control with a fast-acting Humalog. This is how I would do it, and you do it exactly right before training, immediately after training, and that's safe. As you noticed, I competed since '93 until 2003. I never stepped on stage without insulin.
Yeah.
Also in the contest preparation and the carb loading and everything else. But as you said, there's many other factors. Talking about Phil Heath, right?
Yeah.
And I have to say this, I kind of criticize him, right? Like we did in this, wrap up after the show.
Right.
It's of course he is one of the best ever. Can he win the Olympia again? Yes, absolutely. Does he have a phenomenal physique? No question about it. But as you noticed, everybody else noticed, his gut was out there. And I took a gazillion photos, and out of respect, I didn't post some, even though they're great photos, just because he let his stomach out.
Right.
Now, if I would be, you say, what is this reversible? I remember back in '93, we were in European Grand Prix Tour, and Flex Wheeler had to pull out. I believe that was a German Grand Prix. And they rushed into the hospital due to some issues, and they're like, oh my God, all your organs are enlarged. And like, hello, yes. All the bodybuilders, probably have enlarged organs, right? And is this reversible? Hardly. I mean, small intestines, big intestines grow. And really, at this point, does Phil Heath has enough muscle mass? Can he reduce his stomach? Yeah, I think systematically he may be. Yeah, I'm against intermittent fasting, but in his case, and guys that need to reduce and as I say, intestines are adaptive. If you start eating less, they're going to shrink, and replace maybe most of the protein that he's eating with essential amino acids. I mean, we talked about this before. I'm very loud about it. Why do we eat chicken and turkey and fish and beef and whey protein? For essential amino acid content of it. So non-essential amino acids can be manufactured in the body, so you can save tremendous amount of calorie and volume by replacing your solid protein food with essential amino acids. I have guys including Charles Poliquin, as you know, Charles,
Yeah.
is taking like 120 grams of essential amino acids a day. You know, so this is one of the solutions that, of course, I would suggest, as Dr. George says about candida, probiotics, digestive enzymes, detox, you know, occasional, you know, anything. If I would be a Phil Heath going into the next show, would be to, you know, manage the stomach and reduce the size.
You know, I want to give you a personal account, because when I was at my biggest, about, you know, over 300 pounds, I was, as the years went on, I had more and more trouble controlling my abdominal region, and I attributed it at the time to a tremendous amount of excessive muscle mass in the abdominal region, which I did have a lot of muscle there, but the bottom line is I couldn't vacuum my stomach. It was like inhibited in some way, and yet I had no body fat anywhere in my body. So I have to assume, now that I look back and I analyze what was going on, you know, I had to eat an enormous amount of food because of my metabolic rate. So I was eating 12 times a day. I was gorging on food and shakes, and probably, you know, I think, like you said, what you guys mentioned was that the intestinal tract, it's smooth muscle. You can't train your smooth muscle. It's involuntary. But when you put food in there and that puts a stretch on it, that's the stimulus for it to get larger. And like any other muscle, it hypertrophies. And my probably intestinal tract hypertrophied, as well as my, you know, some of my organs in there, so that they can handle the enormous amount of food. I think a lot of questions we get as bodybuilders is, what's the maximum amount of protein that you could eat at one meal and assimilate? And I always tell people, it depends on who the person is. You know, bodybuilders can assimilate way more protein per sitting than the average person, probably because our organs enlarge to enable us to handle that, and all the muscles, because of the muscle mass we have on our body. So like you said, I think the key is, if the organs are getting bigger, and this is not necessarily a bad thing, because these organs are made of muscle, and muscle can atrophy and get small, like you said. As I lost weight, and over the years, purposely, obviously, to downsize, my abdomen got smaller and smaller and smaller, and I can vacuum now, and I actually have a small waist. So, you know, but I had to almost starve it off a little bit. So, like, I think you're right, Milos. I think that while as bodybuilders we don't want to necessarily fast, in Phil Heath's case, he's such a genetic freak, it might actually, that might be the solution to his problem, eating smaller meals. I talked to Chris Cormier about this the other day on the phone. He was convinced that his waist always stayed very small because he just ate small meals. And he said he did it purposely because he knew that, you know, that he wanted to keep a small waistline. Now, once again, luckily, Chris is a genetic freak, so he's able to maintain his muscle mass on smaller amounts of food, whereas maybe the average guy would have, you know, disappeared. But I think Phil's genetics are good enough that he probably can reduce his food intake, increase his fiber intake from a fiber supplement like I sell, Fiberlize, put a probiotic food in there, like maybe a fermented sauerkraut, like Bubby sauerkraut, to give him the good probiotics, as George, you know, suggested. Possibly he's, you know, bloating because of that, and give his body a rest. You know, maybe only eat, you know, 8 or 10 hours out of the day and fast the rest of the day. He might be surprised that his waist might come down a lot more than he thinks. George, would you say that would be the smartest strategy at this point for someone like Phil?
Yes, I absolutely agree with Milos that everything that is distended, they can go shrinking under caloric stimulus. Even the heart surgeon told me at the gym that you can actually diminish the heart thickness, not just the left ventricular hypertrophy, but the organomegaly of the heart, by dropping down 50 pounds, losing 20 kilograms. Another thing I wanted to say is about the intra-abdominal pressure under heavy load of squat and leg press and lunges. Right. Because we see that it gets distended as we go down and as we lift the press, and it gets so big, the intra-abdominal pressure gets so high that the linea alba, which is the thin line between the rectus abdominis and the umbilicus, they can pop out because of the force within, you know? Right. So maybe this is also a fact. And also this is it's getting worse if somebody weighs 250 pounds, you know?
Do you think that's what went on with Ronnie Coleman's abdomen? He was squatting, 800 pounds, you know, front squatting 600. You think that kind of
especially if you use a belt, that makes things even worse.
Yeah, a lot of people think, you know, Milos, Charles Glass was always a believer. If you wear a belt, your stomach won't get, you know, won't stick out. You know, I've heard, but then I've heard people say what George just said, that the belt is actually worse because it kind of creates like it puts a band of pressure in a weird place, and it doesn't distribute the intra-abdominal pressure correctly. What's your take on that?
Well, yeah, I can see both sides of the story, but I know many guys, including there was one guy from Serbia back in when I started '87. He was actually reducing his waist size, but by wearing a tight belt 24 hours a day for like 6 months, and it was tremendous. Seriously, I actually. Back in the day when I started working with King Kamali, I told him that too. He said, "Are you serious?" I said, "I'm that serious." So he was doing it. He was tightening his 24 hours a day. It was no joke. Look, I mean, you see in this, you know, African tribes when ladies like elongate their neck, right? You know, that's a mechanical thing, right?
Yeah.
So I personally always use belt and super tight. You know, so I'm more inclined to say that if I'm going to have somebody squat, first of all, you know, a lot of guys when they squat to deadlift, they just let go. You know, I would, you know, tell another thing to Phil Heath. I would control the stomach 24 hours a day. You know, this is, you know, something when you talk, when you walk, when you drive, when you do whatever. You know, pay attention and suck in the stomach, glued to your spine, so to speak.
Right. Yes.
And if you train like this also, I mean, many times Chris Lund was doing a photo shoots at my gym for Flex Magazine photo shoots, and guys would come and do like whatever biceps, triceps, and they let their gut out.
Right.
And they cannot use those pictures, right?
Right.
You know, so you have to constantly, you know, keep it in.
It's actually the diaphragmatic breathing, yeah?
I'm sorry?
The diaphragmatic breathing.
Diaphragmatic.
Yeah,
breathing.
you know, I agree with you. I mean, when you mentioned Ronnie Coleman having a small waist and growing, Dr. George sent that picture to me. I don't know if you posted with Phil Heath. There was the front double biceps posed with a teeny tiny stomach, you know, and now, you know, so obviously, you know, things are happening in a you know, direction that he doesn't want to go in, you know. So now, if he plans to come back and regain the title, which is quite possible. I mean, Jay Cutler did back in 2009, and he did it so convincingly. I mean, really, he came back. I think that 2009 was his best year ever.
Yeah.
He was extra motivated. You mentioned, in your opinion, that Phil had a good conditioning. He had a good conditioning, but not Phil Heath conditioning. He was definitely off comparing to like previous years, especially from the front. Not controlling the stomach, that's like half of the body, and then his legs were not usually sharp and separated as normal. Yeah, from behind, his hamstring and glutes were tight, and he recently just posted this on Instagram, like, "Oh, you're talking about conditioning, look at my hamstring." Yeah, but this is just that part of the body. A statement is, I don't hate on Heath. I think he's a great guy. And he had 7 titles. He can maybe get 8 next year, but he really, come on. If you're Mr. Olympia and you're on a stage,
I think we lost Milos there. Yeah, I'm sucking my stomach in right now. I'm trying to do some diaphragmatic breathing, George.
Dave, this is something that Joe Weider suggested to Ronnie Coleman, actually.
Right.
To do this, right?
Yeah. No, I think you're right. When before a show, I would try to do like suck. You know, while I'm driving, I'm sucking my stomach in. It's just,
keep it there.
It's practice.
Hold the breath for 10 seconds, right?
Yeah. And I actually have done a video I called intestinal breathing, where you actually pull your stomach in, you push it out. You pull it in, push it out 300 times a day in a row, and you build up that transverse abdominis strength to enable to hold your stomach in. But I think Phil is beyond that. I don't think it's at the stage where he's just forgetting to suck his stomach in. I think he physically can't do it anymore, because I think that there's something blocking it. Whether it be, like you said, enlargement. I think it's his omental fat. I really do. I really believe that might be what it is. I think he really spent this past year trying to get bigger and grow, and I think it might have made things worse. Because it was, you would think his abs would look better than last year, because, you know, here he was purposely trying to lower, you know, tighten that waist up. He got the surgery for the hernia, and it looks worse. So I have to believe that it's a progressive thing that's getting worse and worse as time goes on at this point.
The surgical hernia is just an aesthetic part of the umbilicus that pops out. Doesn't mean that all the viscera, they're gone.
Right.
So the problem still remains. But I believe it's easier to burn down the visceral fat than progressively diminishing the internal organ size. Mm-hmm. So it can happen faster, burning down the visceral fat.
Right. And what would you say would be the best strategy? Just not eat as much, do fasting? I mean, what would be your suggestion to do it as quickly as possible?
The problem with bodybuilders is that they have to eat frequently. Right. Okay, in order to. So IF is not something that is recommended to bodybuilders because they're gonna lose muscle, you know, right, and out of energy. So I believe during pre-contest preparation, during cutting down, to cease the insulin use and IGF-1 and just use growth hormone. Right. While on the bulking phase, okay, you can use insulin, but the 3 months of dieting, stop using insulin in case that it might burn down this visceral fat in the 12-week procedure.
Here's an interesting scenario. I wish we could get Milos back for this. I don't know, maybe we could hang up on him and try to call him back. But, you know, here's an interesting scenario. There were certain bodybuilders that in the 90s, Sean Ray, Kevin Levrone, who in the off season would not train for like 6 months. They would take no drugs. They would just kind of be regular people. And they'd actually shrink down. And if you saw them in the off season during this period of time, you wouldn't even know that they were professional bodybuilders. And then right before a show, they'd go back on the gear, start eating again, training hard again, and they'd blow right back up and they'd look great. And these guys never had any distension problems in their abdomen. Is it because they had these long periods during the year where they were kind of just doing nothing, not eating as much?
I believe so, but this might be risky for because we use the off season for eventually for growing, you know, and improving. Right. So they just remain the same with cutting cycles. Right, but
they remain the same size-wise, but they never had abdominal distension issues. Milos, I don't know if you heard what I said. I was saying that some guys like Sean Ray and Levrone in the off-season wouldn't train at all, wouldn't take drugs, and they never had any abdominal distension issues. Do you think that may be why? Because they kind of were giving their body a break from all the food and all the, you know, the heavy weight and all that stuff?
If possible, but you see, I'm like this. For me, there is no really off-season. You know, I said this in one of the interviews. Off, just the word itself, you know, means what? Oh, now I'm off, so I can do whatever, I can eat whatever. No, everything has to be controlled. You don't want to have increase the weight, you want to increase the muscle size. So it's a different thing. This is why, you know, I put the guys on insulin, but in a structured, calculated manner. Right. You know, and, you know, making sure the stomach is small. However, it happens to some guys because, they probably still overeat. Yeah. You know, they let it go. And now I'm going to tell you this. I've seen many, especially Asian bodybuilders. They were, let's say, 16 to 12 weeks before the show, almost starving. Less than 1,000 calories a day. Wow. I mean, we are speaking of, incredible. And they maintain quite a bit of size, you know, and get super ripped. Yeah. And I've seen this with some European bodybuilders as well, German. So I don't recommend this, but in a Phil Heath's situation, he has plenty of muscle mass. And it's different when you're building and maintaining. I think he can maintain with much less calories than as he was building. You know, there's that protein turnover, and really, John Meadows, for example, I just talked to him recently. I mean, he said, don't say this publicly, but oh well. He eats like a minimum amount of calories, 150 grams of protein maybe a day. Right. And you see his size and his condition. So I really think that if I'm Phil and maybe Hani, you know, advising him, I would dramatically reduce his calories in a volume of food he's taking per meal. And as I said before, I would replace most of the protein with essential aminos. Now, Dr. George said about good bacteria with essential amino acids, right? You don't have a digestive issues because they're already in elemental state. Right. They're pre-digested. So that's another huge plus. And I did this with some guys in a couple of months. they tremendously reduce their stomach bloatness.
Yeah.
You know, so
well, yeah, it makes sense because
it
makes sense because your digestive digestive organs don't need to really do any work to digest the protein. It's just absorbed right through the gut. So
it's already there. You know,
yeah.
so basically what you have, you take a carbohydrates, amylase is there, and it's very easy to digest, and especially if you pick the carbohydrates that you're accustomed to. You know, I don't know if you have guys. I have guys that cannot tolerate sweet potatoes. The oats are bloating them, this and that. So you know, he should just find the foods that you know, sit with him. You know,
right.
Maybe do the food allergy test. Dramatically reduce the amount of calories that he's taking. I'm sure that he's going to maintain the size and come super ripped, which would be a formula to win.
Yeah. Now, obviously, you know, I don't think he has food allergies at this point because you would think that he's probably eating the same foods now that he ate earlier in his career. So it has to do with, you know, I think when you beat up your digestive system, you know, you can beat your body up and you grow more muscle. You beat your digestive system up and you grow more digestive system, right? And that doesn't look good on stage when the digestive system enlarges. So the only way you're going to reduce internal size, like you would reduce external size, is cut the stimulus to it, right? So you got to give the digestive system a break, and you got to not give it as large of meals. And I know it sounds counterintuitive from a bodybuilding perspective, but like Milos, you pointed out, Phil doesn't need to get any bigger at this point. He just needs to maintain what he has and reduce his waist size. And I think that it's a pretty sound strategy. And from what Dr. George is saying, you know, it makes sense medically as well, you know.
Well, can I just jump in? Because you said, like, you don't think that Phil is using any different foods, you know, so he's not allergic to it. About 10 years ago, I was with Charles Poliquin, right? And he was doing a seminar, and he said something very interesting that I didn't believe at the time. He says, you become allergic to exact food sources that you're eating.
Yeah.
So if you're eating like predominantly chicken, you do the test and you're going to be allergic to it.
Really?
So, you know, for that reason, it's good to rotate, you know, the sources of protein. Like I said, I didn't believe it, and then I did the test, and sure enough, you know, I was allergic to exact proteins that I was eating.
That's funny. That is kind of interesting. Yeah. But George, give us a final analysis if you had to write a medical prescription to Phil Heath for what he should do step by step. Give it to us right now as like a final wrap up to the show.
Well, I don't want to take this responsibility, but according to my...
It's all right. Hypothetically speaking, all right?
Yes, lower calories and keep the protein high enough in order to retain muscle mass, but cut calories from carbs, fat, and overall calories. Lower the insulin pre-contest and IGF-1. Use GH instead, along with some supplements that may reduce the insulin-resistant GH-induced, like chromium, lipoic acid, vanadyl sulfate, and berberine. And do more single involvement, one joint exercises like leg curls or leg extensions, you know. And also use, of course, the probiotics, the Candida albicans. Do this diaphragmatic breathing, this exercise. And I think things are going to work like in Rolly Winkler. He diminished his stomach, didn't he?
Yeah. You know, a lot of people, I've heard that Rolly Winkler wore one of those waist shapers, you know, like the men's physique guys and the bikini girls wear, to help bring his waist size down a lot, too. What do you, that's kind of like the old belting technique, Milos, that you used back in the 90s.
Yes, and I see it with many people. It works, really. It's uncomfortable, it's pain in the ass, but it works.
Yeah.
It shapes you into it, yes.
You know, this is a true story. When I was back in the 90s training at a couple gyms in the New York City area, I was running one gym, and I would close the gym at night, maybe midnight, and there would be these guys that would come in at night. You know, these genetically gifted guys. They could drink like beer all day, and they'd have great physiques. And they would all wear these, it was like a cult of them. They would all wear those rubber suit waist belts. You know, they were like neoprene weight belt, not weight belts, like waist shapers. This is before anyone even knew about them. And they called them sweat belts. And they would cinch them on their waist, and they would wear them. And I'll tell you, I used to laugh like thinking like they were fools. They had the smallest waist I've ever seen. So it must have been working. Even though, and here I am thinking, oh, I'm so much more knowledgeable than these guys. These guys are morons. You know, what a bunch of wasting their time sweating like a bunch of idiots in the gym. And it does work, you're right. You know, it's like you said, it's just uncomfortable, you know.
Yes, I mean, how can you argue with the results? Yeah, no matter how ridiculous it sounds, but that's it. But you mentioned genetically gifted guys drinking a beer. I mean, and you mentioned Kevin Levrone. Kevin is drinking a bottle of martini a day.
He was.
Hey, Kevin,
yeah.
You know, I'm serious. When 2002, especially, if you remember, I think, in my opinion, you know, 2001 or 2002, when he was second to Ronnie.
Yeah.
It was spectacular.
Yeah.
He was, last 7 days, he was in Fullerton. He hardly trained. And, you know, there was always martini. You know, so there was his fish, vegetables, and martini. There's the diet.
But Kevin was a freak too. Kevin was never an overeater. I've spent time with Kevin, like when he was competing. He would eat small, like maybe 5 or 6 meals a day, small, you know, nothing overly done. I mean, he just wasn't like a food person. Some guys just don't care about food. They just do it because they have to do it. It's their job. That's the way to eat, you know, if you can somehow manage it, you know.
Yeah, but you see, let's talk about Lee Haney back in the day, right? I don't think Lee Haney ever had more than 250 grams of protein a day, right?
Really? Wow.
I was having a 500 in average for 15 years straight. You know, for me that was insufficient, but you know, here it is. He was really, back in the day, in the 80s, a mass monster, aesthetically,
right,
you know, pleasing, but you know, still you know, huge. And he was just eating 250 grams of protein a day.
No,
you know, so
yeah. No,
some people are like that. Protein turnover really works. I mean, I've seen them on super low calories, way under. I mean, the way I do it, I take your BMR, thermic effect of exercise, thermic effect of feeding, and I find your caloric requirement, and then according to this, maybe I make a little deficit. Well, these guys are having a 2,000, 3,000 calorie deficit a day for months, and they really retain most of the mass. I mean, yes, it's steroids, it's other drugs they're taking. I agree with Dr. George. You don't necessarily need to take insulin and IGF-1 in a pre-contest period.
Right.
You know, you reduce carbohydrates dramatically. But if you do like, you know, these 3 days low, 1 high, 2 days low, 1 high, or 5 days no carbs, and then 2 days 1 high, 1 moderate, you know, maybe on those days you can replenish the glycogen quickly with some small dosage of insulin.
Right.
And there are different methods to all that, but all in all, Phil Heath really needs to dramatically reduce the calories, and I think he's going to enjoy life much more, because it's for me, the hardest thing in bodybuilding was force feeding.
Yeah.
I was one of the smaller guys that needed size, and it was always like, eat that chicken and rice meal, and you know, I'm so sick of it, I can't. But you know, I was eating. You know, now when I look back, I was training twice a day, like, you know, pretty much every day.
Yeah.
That was not hard, but force feeding was.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that we see Phil probably threatened by Rami, big Rami.
Right.
Probably wanted to, you know, still, you know, get some more size so he would be more competitive.
Yeah.
But here comes Sean Roden, comes slice and dice and beat him. So, you know, he can see that he doesn't need necessarily the size.
Right.
He just needs the refinement to his physique and small waistline.
Yeah, I mean, Dexter was never the biggest guy, and he always was very deadly on stage, so that definitely feeds into that whole theory as well. Now, you know, we didn't mention Kai Green. Probably the two biggest eaters in all of pro bodybuilding were Kai Green and Ronnie Coleman, right? And they all, later in their careers, suffered with the gut issue, you know, the distended abdomen issue. Kai, however, seems to be a master at posing. You know, he's a guy who practices posing hours a day. He loves to, you know, he has very good body awareness and control. So I feel that he's able to control his midsection better, but on certain poses you do see it popping out, especially later in his career. He definitely had the stomach problem. And I have to believe that it's probably because, you know, he also eats an enormous amount of food. I mean, we know that, right?
You're talking about Phil?
No, I'm talking about Kai. Kai eats an enormous amount of food, and he also had the abdominal distension issue.
Yes, he did. I mean, you posted. I don't know if Kai is planning to compete. I would love to see him compete again. Yeah. You know, he's one of my favorite bodybuilder. And yes, what I was talking about. If you keep 24 hours a day tight stomach, you know, consciously gluing your stomach to the spine. This is what Kai Green is doing, and he said that there is sometimes that abdominal distension, but he controls it. He can get away with it. Right. Phil Heath, no matter how insulted he will be with this, as a Mr. Olympia, cannot be 1 second on the stage letting the stomach out. Yeah. So that's hours of practice, so be it. 24 hours a day, keeping it tight, so be it. He can retain that title just in that way, you know, having a tight midsection and a condition that we've known him for.
Yeah. Well, guys, I appreciate it. Dr. George, do you have any final words?
Yeah, I want to ask you both something. Does it matter the day of the show if you overeat, you're going to have this kind of problem? Or if you eat too much fiber the day of the show and kind of mess up your physique, even though you don't have this kind of issue?
Yeah, but why would you eat fiber the day of the show?
If you don't have fiber the day of the show, obviously you're going to get bloated.
Right.
Yeah, you know, you don't eat. I mean, most of the time, you know, the way I would do it, you hardly eat on the day of the show. Yeah. You know, basically, if you load up and your glycogen is there, you just need to dry out. You can have a small meals. And with the guys that have a distended stomach, I would tell them not to eat anything.
I've noticed that when I implement my fiberlyzed product on a lot of bodybuilders that have the problem of abdominal issues, it solves a lot of their problems. A lot of the stomach issues are not like a long-term enlargement issue. It's just that people are not pooping enough. You know, they're not getting all this food they're eating out of their intestinal tract efficiently. So fiber can solve a lot of that problems. Fiber might help 50% of Phil's problems, for all we know. The other 50% obviously is due to, you know, the enlargement of the omentum area, maybe just the stretching of the fascia that holds the abdominal musculature together. You know, just like a pregnant woman. If you've ever seen a woman give birth, after she gives birth, her abs are never the same because she's stretched that linea alba out. The tissue is not holding in the abdominal musculature the way it did before, and it never will. You can never retighten those abdominal muscles, you know. And even if you did go in there surgically and try to do it, they would just rip back open again because of the exercises we do. So there definitely needs to be better abdominal control as we get older than when we were younger because of the fact of the stretching of that tissue as well.
Yes, correct.
So, well, I want to thank you both for coming on the show. Milos, I know you're having a great time over there in China. It'll give you a little break from social media for another 3 months, but keep us updated on what's going on over there. And Dr. George over there in Greece, keep up the great work. I know you're a real social media maniac over there. You're always posting up great stuff, and we always appreciate your input anytime we have a medical situation or we want to really get down to the nitty-gritty on what's going on from a physiological standpoint.
I want to send you both my new book, okay? I'll mail it to you.
George has got a new book. He's got a new book every 6 months. You come out with a new book. I love it. What's this one called?
It's The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and it's a little bit improved for the one that I gave you, the pets using sports.
Oh, cool. Where can people purchase this book, George?
You both like it, okay?
Where can people buy the book?
They can get it on Amazon, okay? And yeah, the usual drill, yes.
Well, I'm sure if you wrote it, it's probably fantastic and it's probably very informative. So anyone out there who wants to check it out, you can get it at Amazon.com. For now, though, we are out of time. Thank you to Milos Sarcev and Dr. George Touliatos. I'm Dave Palumbo. We'll see you next time.